welcome. Today I really just wanted to draw some teeth. I saw some cool photos of teeth on Pinterest and got really inspired to draw them, so I did that. Initially for this video I had planned to do a version of the 100 Heads challenge, but I think I'll save that for another time in the future. I've been trying to just play a lot in my sketchbook recently, and this is really another instance of that. I want to incorporate more color and different mediums, since a lot of the time I end up defaulting to pencil and ink. That's really my comfort zone and it's what I prefer, but I think it's still good to try different things. And I've accumulated a lot of art supplies over the years that I want to make better use of, because I bought them for a reason, and I think that getting outside of my comfort zone and trying new things will probably be really good for my development as an artist. So for these teeth, I decided to sketch in pencil crayon, which is technically different than just a regular pencil. I picked a kind of fleshy tone because I was undecided on how exactly I wanted to proceed with them after the sketch was done, and I wanted something that could blend into the background if it needed to. When sketching, I try to focus on the size of things relative to one another, or I guess proportion more than anything. Looking at the shapes in between objects, in this case in between the teeth, can help you with getting the right proportions. When I was in middle school, I had an art teacher who tried to describe this concept to me by asking us to draw the space around the chair and not the chair, which confused me greatly. I tried to ask her to clarify, but she wouldn't, just saying, "Draw the space around the chair. That's what I want you to do." When I looked at all the other kids' drawings later, I felt really stupid because I had literally drawn the spaces left between the legs of the chair and between the back and the seat. Needless to say, I didn't get a great mark on that assignment, but I still feel like she probably could have explained the concept to us a little bit better, especially since I asked. Regardless, it is actually really important to look at the space between things and the shapes those spaces make when thinking about proportion. It can act as a real clue to show you how big things are and how far away they are in relation to one another. I'm still not the best at it, especially when drawing things in perspective, but it was something that I was keeping in mind here while drawing these teeth from reference. I drew mostly real human teeth here, but the last two are perhaps obviously fake ones. I wanted to sneak some wolfish teeth in there as well for some practice, because I have a character who has big wolfy teeth growing out of his face due to a magical mutation, and they're very difficult to draw, especially on a human head, and so I thought, well, I might as well use the opportunity while I'm drawing teeth to get a little bit of practice in. I had a lot of fun sketching with pencil crayons. They're a little bit slipperier than I would like compared to graphite, but they're also much cleaner and don't smudge as much, so I think I'm going to keep these out of my closet and at the ready for further sketching in the future. To ink these, I used my beloved TWSBI fountain pen. I love this thing so much. It got me through university without having my hand fall off taking notes by hand, and it's also now one of my favorite tools for inking. In it, I'm using Platinum Carbon Black. I used to use Noodler's black ink, and I actually used up a whole bottle, but I recently switched to Platinum Carbon Black since it holds up a little better to watercolors. I do actually miss the smell of Noodler's ink though. It has a very peculiar sort of sweet smell, and it's strong enough that whenever you take the cap of the pen off, you get a little bit of a whiff of it. And the Carbon Black ink doesn't really smell like anything at all. Although I guess the smell probably isn't why you would want to buy one ink over the other, and I think ultimately that Carbon Black is generally a little bit better behaved and is probably easier to find as well in stores. As for the actual art, I really tried to take my time. Though this footage is sped up, inking all of these took me around 40 minutes, 45 minutes. I have a tendency to rush through things just in general, but I also know that rushing is a really great way to ruin your art, especially if you're working with something permanent like ink, so I really made an effort not to do that. The first ones, I did a little bit of experimentation with some broken lines and hatching to indicate line variation, since fountain pens can't really do that in the way that like a dip pen with a steel nib might be able to. I actually had some plans to ink these with a dip pen and a red ink that I have, but I decided that I didn't want to go through all of the hassle of using a dip pen. What fountain pens lack in springiness, they more than make up for in convenience, but I'll probably break up my dip pen in a future video since I do like using them. I just didn't feel like having to go and clean it up afterwards. Another thing that I wanted to mention was this sketchbook. I kind of got it on a whim, and I believe it's an Artix one. It's actually quite nice. I think that the paper is quite nice. I believe on the label it doesn't say that it's mixed media, but I have used some acrylics and watercolor in it, and I feel like it's handled them pretty well. Using the watercolor, the page did buckle a little bit when I really started adding lots of layers, but I also didn't really tape the paper down properly before I started, so I think ultimately it handled it quite well, and when you have it open, it does lay very flat. The book is bound in a really weird way where it is almost like a watercolor block with a cover kind of folded on top of it, so you can rip out each individual page. They're not sewn together in like little leaflets like a normal sketchbook has, like the pages folded and sewn together. So they're just held together with glue, which does kind of make me nervous that it will start to fall apart at some point, but so far it's held up really well and I haven't really noticed that. It is nice if you like really mess up a page and you just want to tear it out, or it gets like paint or markers all over it and it's just like not so good. So that is nice, but I do worry because it was quite easy to just tear it out. So I worry that especially if I do use a lot of different mediums and I'm introducing a lot of like water and potentially like alcohol from markers and things, that the glue may start to dissolve potentially. But so far, it's been handling everything quite well, and I'm fairly impressed with it, actually. After inking, I went back in with pencil crayon. I'm kind of scared of color. I think I mentioned that in my last video, that I'm not very confident with color and that I tend to avoid it. That's another reason why I've been trying to push myself to play around more in my sketchbook. I think that it might not always turn out, but if I frame it as play, then it feels less serious and more fun and lower stakes, so it's not as big of a deal if it doesn't end up turning out. One thing I did notice though, and I'm not totally sure who's to blame here, but the pencils did actually end up smudging the ink a little bit, which was really weird. I left the ink to dry for over an hour because I left and went and painted a mini for a Dungeons and Dragons game in between doing the inks and coloring, so I thought that it would be dry, and it didn't smudge at all when I like erased the sketch lines. So I'm not really sure what happened. I think maybe the pigment particles in the ink that make it waterproof were still actually sitting on top of the paper, and that the wax and the pencil like moved them around. But I'm really not sure. You can't really see it, so it's not too bad, but it was weird and not something I was expecting at all. At this point, while I was coloring, I wasn't looking at the references anymore. I kind of just thought really hard about what they had looked like previously and tried to apply what I know about shading to my mental image of what the teeth looked like. And I actually think they turned out pretty nicely. Especially like the teeth, not the gums. Like I think that the teeth turned out really well. My first job, I actually worked at a dentist's office. It was a really lovely job and everyone was always so nice to me. And I would come in after school and help putting away files and sterilizing all the dental tools with the autoclave and just generally getting things ready for the next day for them. Sometimes, though, there would be a tooth from an extraction left on a tray that I had to get rid of, and it was kind of gross, but it was also really cool to see. And I think if I was more science-minded, I may have actually liked to become a dentist. I think it's pretty cool. It's like an interesting way to help people, and like teeth are so important to your health overall that I think it's a pretty cool job. The dentist I worked for was also my family dentist, which was nice. I was talking to the dentist one day about how I still had one of my baby teeth and that my adult tooth was starting to come in over top of it. And he was like, "What? Do you want me to pull it?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, that would actually be great." And he had an opening, so he just did it. And I went back to work afterwards and ended up cleaning the tools that he had used for my extraction. And I remember that the receptionist was like mad at him and concerned about him having done it and then sending me right back to work. But it didn't really hurt, and I think it ended up being like a pretty fond memory when I think about it. It's like a pretty good story to tell as well. But yeah, I like going to the dentist. kind of fun, even though sometimes it does feel like they're trying to pull all of my teeth out of my head when they use those little scrapey hook things to clean your teeth, but you know, otherwise it's not so bad. So after I finished coloring in and shading the teeth, I was like, hey, this is pretty cool, but all that white paper looks a little bit sparse. What if I just, and then I reached for an acrylic marker, and I'm not actually completely sure I should have done that. Looking back at the footage, I kind of actually prefer how it looked with just the white in the background. Maybe if I had done a different color, like a really dark red or a tealy green or something, the contrast would have been better, because I feel like having a nice flat color throughout is really nice, but I did what I did and I like the pop of color, but yeah, I really do think that it's a problem with the contrast between the teeth and the blue. I think it's maybe not extreme enough. But I just kind of laid in this big wash of blue, and then I was finished creating this page in my sketchbook. It was a lot of fun doing this. I'm glad that I ended up deciding to just go with my whim of drawing teeth, because I really enjoyed making this video and drawing all of the teeth. So I may draw more teeth in the future because it was really fun. And yeah, I don't know. I think it turned out pretty good. It's like a fun page. I like the big pop of blue, even if I think maybe the contrast is a little bit off. But ultimately, I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out, and I'm especially pleased with how the shading on the teeth and some of the gums ended up looking. So, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed watching me draw some teeth and hearing me ramble about fountain pens and dentists. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch, and I hope that you'll join me in the future for some more videos. I've got a lot of plans for stuff that I want to make, so watch out. Anyway, thank you again, and bye!